My name is Marcus Johnson. I grew up in Brooklyn, in the kind of neighborhood where you learn early that nothing comes easy, and most things get taken from you before you're ready to let them go. I was never the smartest, never the smoothest talker, but I knew how to work. I learned to push through long shifts, to pick up the second job when the first one couldn't cover the bills, to keep my head down when the world made me feel small. That was my life. Work, grind, survive. And through it all there was one thing that made it worth it. Her. My wife. Her name was Denise. When I met her, it felt like someone had finally seen me. Not just the man in the uniform or the worker. Punching in hours. She saw me. Her laugh had a way of filling a room, making even the cracked walls of our apartment feel warm. I loved her like a man starved of tenderness, and she gave it back, or at least I thought she did. For years I carried the belief that what we had was strong enough to hold us together through everything. The poverty, the late nights, the tired mornings. Then she died. It happened faster than I could process, a sickness that came and pulled her out of this world before I had the chance to even understand what was happening. One week she was walking around, smiling, tired but alive, and the next she was in a hospital bed, slipping away while I stood useless at her side. I buried her before I even believed she was gone. Since then, I've carried grief like a stone, lodged inside me. I went to work, came home, sat in silence, repeated the cycle. But every now and then I would make my way to the cemetery. I'd bring flowers, set them down at her grave, and let myself feel it all, the love, the loss, the emptiness. It was the only place I could talk to her, even if all I got back was silence. That afternoon was no different. The sky hung low, grey like it knew my mood. I walked past the rusting gate, down the uneven path, bouquet in my hand. When I reached her grave, I knelt down, brushing away the dirt that had gathered on the stone, placing the flowers carefully. My fingers lingered on the carved letters of her name, tracing them like I was afraid to forget the shape of it. I whispered to her, the way I always did. I told her I missed her, that work was still breaking me down, but I was managing. I told her I still cooked the rice the way she liked, even if no one was there to eat it. Talking to a grave might sound crazy, but when you've loved someone like that, you don't stop just because the world says they're gone. Then I heard it. At first it was faint, a sound I thought was maybe the wind through the trees. But as I listened closer, I realized it wasn't the wind. It was crying. Small, shaky sobs, two voices tangled together, like a pair of hearts breaking side by side. I looked up, scanning the rows of headstones, and that's when I saw them. Two boys, young, no more than 10, maybe younger. They sat just a few feet away from me. Knees pulled up, arms wrapped tight, their faces wet with tears. Their clothes looked worn, shoes scuffed. The kind of kids you recognize instantly because you've seen hundreds of them in the neighborhood. Kids carrying the weight of things too heavy for their age. I froze. What were kids doing here, alone, crying like that? Cemeteries aren't for children. They're for people like me, grown men who've buried too much to count, who carry scars inside and out. Kids are supposed to be laughing somewhere, running. Down cracked sidewalks, chasing basketballs, not sitting in front of headstones crying like the world already chewed them up. My first thought was maybe they were lost, or maybe they were visiting someone else. But then I realized something that made my chest tighten. They weren't sitting at just any grave. They were sitting at hers, at Denise's. I blinked, my throat dry, my body stiff. I didn't want to believe it at first. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe they just sat there because it was a quiet spot. But then I heard it clear as day between their sobs. One of the boys whispered a word that cracked my world in half. Mum. I swear, in that instant the ground tilted beneath me. I couldn't breathe. My heart slammed against my ribs as if trying to break free. Two boys crying at my wife's grave, calling her Mum. I wanted to move, to speak, to demand answers from ghosts that weren't there, but I couldn't. I stood there frozen, my hand still resting on the cold stone as their voices sank into me like knives. I had buried my wife believing I knew her, believing our love had been real, that the years we built together meant something. But in that moment, watching those boys cry, everything I thought I knew about her shifted. And for the first time since her death, Grief wasn't the only thing. Burning in my chest. I didn't move at first. My knees wanted to give out. My hands wanted to shake, but I held myself still, staring at those two small figures like they were ghosts that had no business being in the same world as me. My wife's grave, my Denise, the woman I had buried, with every ounce of love I had left, and here were two boys crying at her headstone, calling her mum. That word echoed through me, over and over, louder than the cars honking in Brooklyn streets, louder than the sirens that scream through the nights, louder than anything I had ever carried in my chest. Mom. They didn't whisper it like a mistake. They didn't stumble over it. It was sure full of pain, the kind of word a child says when it's tied to their bones. I wanted to tell myself I misheard, that maybe they were talking about someone else, that maybe their grief had spilled over from another grave, another story. But every time their lips moved, every time their voices cracked, I heard it again. Mom, my Denise, my wife, their mother. I took a step closer without realizing, the crunch of gravel under my boots making them both stiffen. They turned their heads just slightly, eyes red, cheeks streaked with tears, but they didn't run. They didn't ask me who I was. They just looked back at the stone, as if my presence meant nothing compared to the hole inside them. That hurt, in a way I can't even explain, because if they really were hers, then who was I? A man who gave his life to her, who thought he knew her heart, who thought he was her family, and yet standing there watching those boys, I felt like a stranger, like someone looking in through a cracked window at a life that wasn't his. Tried to remember every detail about Denise in that moment. The way she smiled when she came home with groceries, tired but still managing to laugh. The way she would rub my shoulders when I dragged myself in from back-to-back shifts. The warmth of her hand in mine when the world felt like it wanted to bury me alive. She wasn't just my wife. She was my anchor. And if those kids were hers, then who was she really? The boys kept whispering. I couldn't catch every word, but the fragments I did hear were enough to slice at me. Wish you were still here. We miss you, Mum. Don't want to go back. Sentences so small, but so sharp. I wanted to step in, to ask them questions, to demand to know what they meant. But my tongue was heavy, and fear pinned me down harder than grief ever had. Because deep down, I already knew. When Denise died, she left me alone with memories and silence. But maybe she left them too. Left. Behind two sons I never knew existed. Sons she never told me about. Sons she had with another man while I was breaking my back at 2 jobs, coming home half dead, trusting that the life I was killing myself for was the same one she was holding together at home. I kept thinking about the hours I missed, the mornings I left before the sun came up, the nights I stumbled in long after she had gone to bed, the times I told myself she understood, that she was proud of me for carrying the weight of both of us. What if those hours, those empty spaces, weren't just lonely for her? What if she had filled them with something else, with someone else? I remembered nights when she said she was visiting her sister, afternoons she claimed she needed groceries that somehow took hours longer than they should. Back then I didn't question it. I trusted her. God knows I was too tired to argue after 12 hours on my feet. I believed she was faithful because I needed to believe it. Without that belief, everything I was sacrificing made no sense. Now, standing in front of her grave with those boys crying into the dirt, all those little moments replayed like a film I had been too blind to watch. And every frame looked different under this light. Every laugh, every absence, every unexplained hour, they all whispered at me, telling me I had been living inside a lie. I backed away a step, my heart pounding so loud I thought they could hear it. The boys didn't move. They just kept crying, their small voices carrying into the evening air. And me, I couldn't cry. Not then. My tears felt locked behind something heavier, something uglier. It wasn't grief anymore. It was betrayal. It was humiliation. It was the sharp, cold edge of knowing I might not have been enough for the woman I gave everything to. The truth is, I would have forgiven her 1,000 times if she had just told me. If she had just looked me in the eyes and admitted her mistakes. I would have carried that pain the way I carried everything else. But she never said a word. She took it to her grave. And now the only confession left were these two boys standing here, living proof of the life she hid from me. I didn't know what to do with myself. Part of me wanted to demand answers, to ask those kids who their father was, what they knew, how long they had lived with this secret. But another part of me knew it wasn't their fault. They were just children, crying for a mother they lost. They didn't choose to be born into this betrayal. So I stood there, caught between rage and sorrow, between love and hate, watching them cry at her grave, realizing my marriage, my love, my life, it was never what I thought it was. And for the first time since Denise died, I wasn't sure if I was mourning her, or mourning the man I used to be before I found out the truth. The cemetery was quiet again except for their sobs. And I swear in that silence I could feel her ghost watching me, daring me to figure out the pieces she left scattered. And I knew I would, because the truth doesn't stay buried. When I left the cemetery that evening, my legs felt like they didn't belong to me. Every step down that cracked sidewalk toward the gate was heavier than the last. The city's noise greeted me outside the rusting fence, cars honking, people shouting, a corner store blasting music too loud. But it all sounded far away, like I was moving underwater. My mind was still back there, frozen at the sight of those two boys, at the sound of that single word, Mom. I carried that word with me through the night. I didn't eat dinner. I sat at the small table in my kitchen, staring at the plate I never touched, listening to the old refrigerator hum. My apartment felt smaller than usual, every corner pressing in on me. Denise's face hung on the wall in a picture frame, one of those studio photos we took when we couldn't really afford it, but she insisted anyway. She looked happy, her smile bright, her arm hooked through mine like she belonged there forever. I used to love that photo. That night I couldn't even look at it. Memories came crashing down one after another, like a dam breaking. At first they were sweet. The way she used to laugh at sitcoms late at night, throwing her head back so freely that even the neighbors upstairs must have heard. The smell of the fried chicken she made on Sundays, seasoning the air so thick it clung to my clothes. The way she'd kiss me quick before I left for the morning shift. Her lips soft, her eyes sleepy but kind. For years, I carried those things like proof that I had done something right in my life. That despite the rough streets, the hard jobs, the constant scraping to survive, I had love. And that was supposed to be enough. But now, with the image of those boys sitting at her grave still sharp in my mind, every memory twisted. That laugh, was it for me or was it echoing from some secret she kept tucked away? That food she cooked, was it only for me or had she fed someone else too when I was out grinding through double shifts? That kiss in the morning, was it as faithful as I thought or did she save her real affection for hours when I wasn't there to see? I hated myself for thinking it. I hated that her death, her absence, didn't protect her from my suspicion. But once the seed of doubt is planted, it grows wild, wrapping around everything you thought you knew. I remembered the days when she would dress a little nicer than usual and say she was going to her sister's. Back then, I didn't think much of it. Family visits were normal and I trusted her. But now I replayed those moments and wondered why she never wanted me to come along, why she brushed me off so quickly if I offered to drive her. Why sometimes she came back quieter than when she left. I remembered nights when she claimed she wasn't hungry, even though I knew she hadn't eaten all day. She would push food around her plate, smile like she was fine, and I let it go. Maybe she had eaten already. But now I thought, eaten with who? I remembered one time years ago when I got home early from work because my boss cut me loose. I was excited, ready to surprise her, maybe spend a little time together for once, but when I opened the door, the apartment was empty. She came back 2 hours later, bags of groceries in her hands, saying the line was long. I didn't question it then. But now that memory sat like a sharp stone in my gut. I kept asking myself, how long? How long had she been carrying this secret? Life while I carried both our futures on my shoulders. Was it months, years? Were those boys born while she still shared my bed, still told me she loved me, still folded my shirts after the laundry? The thought burned me alive. But here's the thing. I didn't want to believe it. Even with the evidence right in front of me, even with those children crying at her grave, Part of me fought to hold on to the woman I thought she was. Denise was good to me in ways no one else had ever been. She knew how to take care of me when the world had chewed me up and spit me out. She made our place a home, even if it was small, even if the paint peeled and the pipes groaned. She didn't treat me like a failure when I worked 2 jobs and still came up short some months. She didn't laugh when I fell asleep in my work boots because I was too tired to untie them. She rubbed my back. She reminded me to eat. She pressed my uniform and told me I was doing enough. That was the Denise I knew. That was the woman I buried. So how could that same woman be the one who left behind 2 children I never knew? How could she hold such a heavy lie in her chest and still smile at me like I was her only one? The more I thought about it, the more I realized maybe it wasn't black and white. Maybe it wasn't about her being good or bad. Maybe it was about the space I left when I was gone. I worked myself half to death because I believed that was love, providing, paying bills, keeping us afloat. But in those empty hours, while I was sweating in kitchens and warehouses, maybe she was lonely. Maybe she found comfort in someone else's arms, and that thought cut deeper than anything. Because if it was loneliness that drove her, then maybe I wasn't just betrayed. Maybe I was part of the reason why. I pushed that thought away, shaking my head, standing up from the table, pacing my small kitchen. I didn't want to give myself that blame. I didn't want to let her off the hook either. But the truth is, messy. Like that. It doesn't sit neatly in one box or the other. I lay down in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Denise's side of the mattress cold and flat. I thought about the boys again, their faces wet with tears, their small hands clutching each other like they were all they had left. They didn't choose this, they didn't ask to be born into her secrets. But their existence was the loudest truth she never told me. Sleep didn't come. All I could hear was their voices broken, calling her mom. All I could feel was the crack in my chest, spreading wider, deeper, threatening to split me in 2. And somewhere in the middle of that restless night I made a decision. I couldn't just leave it there. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen them, hadn't heard them. I needed answers. I needed to know the truth about Denise, about those children, about the life she lived when I wasn't looking. Because grief I could live with, betrayal though. That was something I had to face. The morning after that sleepless night, I dragged myself out of bed with eyes burning and body heavy, like I had been fighting in my dreams and lost. I went through the motions, brushed my teeth, splashed water, on my face, pulled on the same old work clothes, but every second of it felt useless. Nothing about my routine mattered anymore. I wasn't just carrying grief now, I was carrying questions, sharp ones that cut me from the inside out. On the bus to work, the city blurred past the window. Kids on their way to school, mothers pulling, toddlers along, men hunched in hoodies trying to shake off last night's drinks. I stared at them without seeing. My head was somewhere else, spinning around Denise, around those boys, around the word that refused to leave my ears. Mom. I had lived with Denise for years, and I thought I knew everything about her. I knew the shape of her laugh, the rhythm, of her footsteps in our apartment, the way she tied her hair back when she was tired. But now all I could think about were the shadows, the gaps in my memory, the nights and afternoons when she wasn't there, the excuses I swallowed without chewing. I remembered the little things first. The way she'd sometimes come home. Later than she said, her face flushed, a faint smell on her clothes that wasn't ours. Not perfume, not alcohol, something I couldn't place. Back then I chalked it up to the city, to being around people, to nothing at all. But now it felt like a scent I should have recognized as betrayal. Then there were the phone calls. Late at night, the phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. Her answering quick, her voice low. When I asked who it was, she'd say her sister or an old friend I never pushed. I told myself she deserved her own space, her own conversations, because she spent so much time waiting for me to come home from work. But what if it wasn't her sister? What if those whispers were for someone else? I thought back to one afternoon, in particular. I had a rare day off and suggested we spend it together. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and said she already had plans with her cousin. She promised we'd have time soon, that we'd go to the park or out to eat. I didn't want to argue, so I let it go. But that day I sat in the apartment alone, watching the clock tick, wondering why she hadn't invited me along. At the time, I convinced myself it didn't matter. Now it mattered more than anything. The pieces were all there, scattered across years of trust and exhaustion, and I realized I had been too tired, too worn down by double shifts to see the picture they made. When you're working yourself to the bone just to keep the lights on, you don't have the energy to question the woman smiling at you when you come through the door. You cling to that smile because it's all that keeps you going. But now I wondered if that smile was hiding something. After work that day, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I walked through the old neighborhood, past the laundromat where Denise used to fold clothes, past the corner store she used to say she shopped at, past the church where she sometimes went on Sundays without me. I looked at those places with new eyes, like they held answers in their walls. Did she meet him here? Did they laugh together while I was clocking hours in a warehouse? Did she hold his hand on these streets, her face lit up the same way she used to light up for me? Every step made my stomach churn, because I wasn't just searching for the truth. I was replaying my own blindness. I had trusted her so fully that I never considered she might betray me, and maybe that trust wasn't love, maybe it was desperation. Desperation to believe I had built something solid in a world where everything else was shaky. I stopped outside the church, leaning against the fence, watching people come and go. Denise always said the church gave her peace, that it helped her breathe when life got heavy. I never questioned it, even though I didn't go with her much. But now, watching couples walk in, kids trailing behind them, I felt anger burn in my chest. Did she find peace here? Or did she find him? The anger didn't last, though. It gave way to something softer, something sadder. Because even if she had betrayed me, even if she had children with another man, I couldn't erase what she meant to me. I couldn't erase the nights she stayed up waiting for me, the way she nursed me when I came home sick, the way she stood by me when money was thin. Betrayal doesn't erase love. It twists it, poisons it, but it doesn't kill it outright. That was the hardest part. Knowing I could hate her and miss her at the same time. Knowing I could want to curse her name and still long for her touch. When I finally made it back home, the apartment felt different. I looked around and saw shadows where I hadn't before. The couch where we sat together, had she sat there with him? The kitchen where she cooked for me, had she cooked for someone else too? Our bed, where I still slept on my side, had it been theirs as well? The questions wouldn't stop. They circled me like vultures, pecking at every memory until I didn't know what was real anymore. That night I pulled out an old shoebox from the closet. Inside were photos, letters, scraps of our life together. I spread them across the table, staring at her face frozen in moments of happiness. In some pictures her smile looked wider, brighter. I wondered if those were the days she had been with. Him carrying his secret while standing beside me. My chest ached, my throat tight. I wanted answers, but all I had were shadows. Still, shadows have weight. And as I pieced them together, one thing became clearer. The woman I thought I knew might not have been the whole woman at all. And if I wanted the truth, I would have to dig deeper, even if it meant shattering the last good memories I had of her. I thought the questions would kill me before the answers ever did. Every night I went to bed with Denise's ghost in my chest, and every morning I woke up with the echo of those boys crying at her grave. I told myself maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they were just kids confused by grief. But the truth doesn't whisper. It waits heavy until you can't ignore it anymore. I started asking around, quiet, careful. I didn't want to look like a mad widower chasing shadows, but I needed to know. In neighborhoods like ours, people talk, even when they shouldn't. It didn't take long before I heard pieces of stories, fragments that slipped out of mouths, too loose or too tired to guard them. She used to come by here with two little ones. I thought they was her nephews. No, she always treated them like they was hers. Each word landed like a hammer on my chest. At first I tried to deny it. Maybe they were mistaken. Maybe they were talking about another woman. But then, someone said it clear with no hesitation. Those boys, yeah, Denise's, she loved them. I stood frozen when I heard it. My throat dried, my ears rang. The street around me kept moving, cars honking, kids shouting, music blasting from a bodega radio. But I was locked in silence. Loved them. That's what they said. Denise loved them. And all I could think was, she never told me. The confirmation hit harder than I thought it would. Grief had already hollowed me out, but betrayal filled the emptiness with something heavier: rage, humiliation, shame. I had walked through life believing I was her only, believing the years I gave her were whole. But while I worked myself to the bone, she had carved out another life, another family, and hidden it right under my nose. I replayed everything with new eyes. The phone calls she took in the kitchen late at night. The afternoons she claimed she was at her sister's. The way she sometimes pulled away when I tried to hold her close, telling me she was tired. Tired. That word became poison on my tongue. Because maybe it wasn't exhaustion from our life. It was exhaustion from balancing two lives and those boys. Their faces haunted me, small, fragile, carrying a grief they didn't deserve. I wanted to hate them, to push the blame onto them, because it was easier than facing the truth about Denise. But every time I saw their eyes in my memory, all I could feel was the innocence. They didn't choose this. They didn't ask to be born into a secret. They were just living proof of it. The part that cut deepest wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was the silence. Denise had every chance to tell me. Every night we lay in the same bed. Every morning we shared the same coffee. Every laugh, every argument, every quiet moment. We lived side by side, and still she carried that truth alone. She took it with her to the grave, leaving me to find out through whispers and children's tears. I tried to make sense of it, to understand why. Maybe it was loneliness, the kind that eats at you when your husband is gone before dawn and back. After midnight, maybe it was need, a hunger I couldn't fill because I was too busy working 2 jobs to keep the lights on. Maybe she thought she was protecting me. But the truth is, it doesn't matter. The result is the same. My wife had children with another man, and she left me to discover it when it was too late to ask her why. That night I sat in the dark of my apartment, the shoebox of photos spread out on the table again. I stared at her smile, the way her eyes sparkled when she looked at me, and I felt something crack inside. I wanted to believe those moments were real. I wanted to believe she loved me, even if she betrayed me. But the line between truth and lie blurred until I couldn't tell the difference anymore. For years I thought grief was the heaviest weight a man could carry. But grief at least comes honest. Betrayal is a stone that keeps getting heavier the longer you hold it. And I was holding it alone. I closed the box, pushed it away, and sat back in my chair with my head in my hands. The bitter truth was clear now. Denise wasn't just mine. She never had been. And I was left with nothing but the pieces, sharp enough to cut every time I tried to put them together. I always thought the hardest part of my life was the grind, the double shifts, the aching feet, the calloused hands, waking up before the sun, riding the same crowded bus, clocking in at one job, then running across town to clock in at another. I used to tell myself it was worth it, that the sacrifice would mean something, that it would build a life Denise and I could stand on together. Now I realize the grind wasn't the heaviest part. The heaviest part was what I didn't see, what was happening while I was breaking my back to keep our world together. I remember nights I came home so late that Denise was already asleep. I would lean down, kiss her forehead, whisper goodnight, then collapse beside her. I thought she was safe in those hours. I thought my absence was forgiven because I was doing it for us. But maybe in those empty nights, she was building a life I wasn't part of. Maybe while I was hauling boxes in a warehouse, she was holding someone else. Maybe while I was sweating in a kitchen, she was whispering promises I never heard. It eats at me the idea that my sacrifice gave her space to betray me. Every hour I sweated in kitchens, every bruise on my hands from lifting boxes, every shift that left me too tired to even untie my boots when I got home, all of it bought her hours of freedom. My body was breaking down so she could have time to build something behind my back. I thought I was giving us a future. Turns out, I was giving her space to love another man. Every paycheck I dropped on the table, every dollar I stretched thin, every bone-deep exhaustion I carried, it was like I was paying for her silence, paying for her secrets, and she spent it all on someone else. I think back on moments I brushed off, and now they burn like open wounds. The nights she didn't answer, my calls, and when she finally picked up, she said her phone had died. I believed her because I wanted to. The errands that dragged on for hours, when she'd come home with just a small bag of groceries and a tired excuse about long lines. The afternoons she said she needed fresh air, walking out with no real destination, coming back with that faraway look in her eyes. I told myself she was stressed, that she needed space, but now I know her mind wasn't with me. It was with him. I should have seen it. The signs weren't invisible. They were there, painted across her face in moments I was too tired, too trusting, too blind to read. I should have asked harder questions. I should have stayed awake when my body begged me to sleep. I should have watched closer. But I didn't, because I trusted her. Trust was my blindfold, and I wore it proudly, thinking it made me a good man, a good husband. But blindfolds don't protect you. They just make the fall hurt worse when you finally hit the ground. And yet, even knowing now, even carrying the sharp edge of truth in my chest, I can't erase the love I had for her. That's the cruelest part. Love doesn't vanish just because truth shows up ugly. Love lingers, stubborn, tangled with betrayal, choking you from both sides. I miss her and I hate her. I want her back and I want to curse her name in the same breath. Both feelings sit heavy in my chest, refusing to let the other one go. I'm split down the middle, half grieving the woman I thought I had, half furious at the woman she really was. The boys. They live in my mind now, uninvited but permanent, their small shoulders shaking, their faces buried in their hands, their voices cracked and raw as they called her mum. I can't shake it. I hear it in the quiet, in the hum of the refrigerator at night, in the spaces where Denise used to breathe beside me. They are innocent, and yet they carry the truth sharper than any adult could have told me. They grieve the same woman I do, but in their grief there is no betrayal. For them, she was whole. For them, she was honest. For them, she was mother. And that's what stings the most. She gave them what she never gave me, her truth. She hid from me but not from them. She loved them openly, without shame, without silence. She carried them in her arms and in her heart, while she carried me in a lie. That's the cruelest cut of all. To know that the love I thought was complete was really only half of her, while the other half lived and breathed for those boys. They are proof of her choices, yes, proof of her betrayal, but they are also proof of her capacity to love, and standing here in the ruins of what I thought I knew, I realize the bitter truth. She saved her truest self for them, while she gave me only the pieces she could afford to share. I wonder sometimes if she planned to tell me one day. Maybe she thought there would be time. Maybe she thought she could keep both lives separate until the pieces fit themselves. But death came too soon, and the secret stayed buried, until those boys cried it into the open. People say the dead deserve a peace, that we shouldn't speak ill of them. But peace is hard to give when the grave holds more than a body. It holds a lie, and I'm the one left carrying it. I sit in our apartment, surrounded by echoes. Her photo on the wall, her clothes still folded in drawers, her perfume faint on an old scarf. I hold these things, and I don't know whether to treasure them or burn them. Because every memory is two things at once now. The comfort of the wife I loved, and the shadow of the woman who betrayed me. I've worked my whole life to be a man of my word, to take the pain and keep moving, to sacrifice and believe it meant something. And now I see what it all came down to. I gave everything and she gave me a half-truth. That's the weight I carry. Not just grief, not just betrayal, but the weight of knowing my love, my sacrifice, my life. It wasn't enough to keep her honest. And as I sit here, speaking these words into the quiet, I understand something I never wanted to face. Sometimes, love doesn't save you. Sometimes it breaks you. Sometimes it leaves you at a grave, staring at children who should have been yours but never were. My name is Marcus Johnson. I was a husband, I was a worker, I was a man who believed. And what I carry now is heavier than any shift, any job, any load I've ever hauled. I carry the truth she left behind.